This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.
Good afternoon, my name is Barry Colfer. I'm the Director of Research at the Institute of International and European Affairs here in Dublin. I'm absolutely delighted to have this opportunity to speak with Minister Thomas Byrne, Minister for European Affairs of Ireland, Minister of State at the Department of Taoiseach on Foreign Affairs and Trade and the Department of Defence. There are now fewer than 100 days between now and the start of the Irish presidency of the Council of the EU. It's the 8th time Ireland is going to have that privilege. I'm really happy to be following up. This is a second conversation, Minister. We spoke before Christmas when we were really starting to focus attention on the fact that this great opportunity for Ireland comes around only every 13 and a half years, is going to happen now in the second half of 2026. So we're a bit closer now. So we're going to have a chance to put a couple of questions to you about where you are and where your thoughts are regarding the presidency. We're facing into, obviously, a very busy legislative period. There's a whole raft of files that are already open, not to mention late-stage multi-annual financial framework, the ongoing war in Ukraine, not to mention the wider geopolitical context. But before I put specific questions to you, just to mention, it is anticipated that in addition to the ongoing files, Ireland will have a bunch of priorities that we'll hope to pursue. They are going to be published in June, and the government is engaged in a really sincere consultative process dealing with different stakeholders to see what the priorities might focus on. And they're likely to focus on things like democracy and values, competitiveness, security and resilience, the MFF, and enlargement. But before that, we don't have the official priorities published yet. So I just want to ask you a couple of very general questions, Minister. The European Union is a lot of things, and it's one of its kind of the central parts of its ecosystem is the single market. And I just wanted to ask, over the course of the presidency, the second half of this year, what do you think can be done to strengthen the single market?
Well, I think a lot, and I hope a lot. We have set out an ambition to have a presidency defined by action. And I think a lot of the action is going to be in the space of competitiveness, in the space of the single market, in the space of simplification. So when we say that we haven't published our objectives, we have said that competitiveness as a broad objective will be one of the themes, security and defence, and our values too. But competitiveness is something that we think we can do well on. And it is also the home for a lot of the files that are currently in the system at the moment, but also proposed to be published as well. So we see a lot coming on the internal market. The leaders of the EU had, first of all, we have the report by Enrico Letta.
Right, of course.
The leaders had a retreat then with former Prime Minister Letta in February in Brussels, discussing the issues of the single market. The leaders then had a discussion at the European Council. There was a list of proposals, broad proposals, set out at the European Council. And it is expected that the European Commission would publish these proposals in more detail. I would hope by now, to be honest, say it's the 9th of April. I'd like to have seen it already. But we look forward to it very anxiously, I suppose, because the leaders will meet again next week at the European Council informal. But the Parliament needs to see it too, and the relevant ministers in finance or the enterprise ministers need to see that too. If these proposals are published and it goes according to the plan that the leaders have only just laid down in the last month, so it should, that will make us very busy during our presidency, putting files, negotiating files on the single market. There's quite a few of them. Some that are some that you've heard a lot about, the Savings and Investment Union. You have Michael McGrath's proposal on the what's called the 28th regime, but thankfully they've changed the name to the EU Inc., which makes more sense. It's a European company structure. A grids package, in terms of how do we reinforce our electricity grids, and there are other proposals as well. And I think they will keep us very, very busy, keep the European Parliament busy. It's not all in our hands. As I said, we haven't just even yet seen the European Commission proposals, and we need the Parliament will need to discuss it, the Member States in general, below the leader level as well, will have to discuss it. But if there's a serious ambition, as the leaders have set out, to have these deadlines in place for a lot of this work to be done by this year, then that means a lot of work for us to do. But we're at the preliminaries of that, so it's a very, very tight timetable. But if we were to do it, I think that we would make huge achievements that will be noticed by people in terms of job prospects and their economic situation as well.
So on that perfect segue, this is a really hard question. Right? Ireland has been in the EU, the EEC as it was, for a little over 50 years. The single market, why should it actually matter to people? What does it mean to people, I suppose?
Well, what it means is that Irish companies can sell their goods and should be able to sell their services all over the European Union. And that's a really powerful position to be in. Because if we look at one classic example, the Irish whisky industry, I mean, that kind of went very much downhill during the economic war with Britain and during Prohibition. So we really didn't have markets then, because Britain included the British Empire. We didn't have markets to sell our products. We weren't part of a European Union. Of course, the European situation was very complex at that time. But now we have a market on our doorstep. And we have trading relationships that are negotiated by the European Union as well for the single market. So we have markets all over the world as well for our goods. So I think we've just seen in Ireland is massive economic success, a huge increase in the number of people working in the country, and a huge increase in our wealth. And it depends on us having that access to the European single market. There's no two ways about it. I think if we can get these proposals through, we can remove blockages that still exist in the single market that don't make it what Enrico Letta calls one market.
Yeah, absolutely. And in addition to the Savings and Investments Union or 28, the artist formerly known as the 28 regime, I think it's important to try and move beyond the abstract to, as you've just done, explain that the
Pointing
single market.
A few wins,
but also single market is basically one of the routes to that Ireland has managed to prosper. And
like if we weren't in the single market, if the European Union did not have competence on trade, like Ireland would not have a trade deal coming with India. Probably wouldn't even have one with Australia. And the other, Canada, for example, another classic example where we got real benefits in this country. We wouldn't be negotiating them on our own. It's too complex, and we're small compared to what the European Union is. So being part of that European Union gives us strength, and we benefit hugely from that strength as well.
And that's a really neat segue, Minister, to another really, really broad topic I want to open up with you, and it's with respect to trade. So you've mentioned a couple of the big topics that have got a lot of attention over recent years. The recently announced trade agreement with India, the ongoing machinations around CETA, the Mercosur agreement, of course. When it comes to trade, I think every country takes their own turn in the presidency. Cyprus now, then us, then Lithuania. There's a certain expectation that Ireland has this kind of particular relationship with America. I think it's fair to say. Do you think it will be possible over the 6 months of Ireland's presidency to put it bluntly, to put US-EU trade relations on a better footing than they currently are?
Well, I'm not sure that it's the European Union's fault that trade relations are the way they are. I think what we have now, at the very least, it's not perfect, but we do have certainty in terms of the agreement that's been reached. And we've worked very closely with Commissioner Maros Šefčovič, and I suppose it's important always to remember the European Commission has the competence on trade deals. They decide and negotiate on our behalf. We then have to agree or disagree with the outcome of the negotiations. And the point is that we support what they do, and we've benefited hugely from it. So in difficult circumstances, I think Commissioner Šefčovič has negotiated an agreement with the USA, and we've supported that. We want to see it implemented because at least it gives companies in Ireland certainty. But I think from an overall point of view, the Irish government is supportive of strong relations with the USA, that transatlantic bridge. We're not the only country in that position, though. I would say most of the member states of the European Union want to have very strong relations. Probably all of them actually want to have very strong relationships with the USA. Some for different reasons. We've big trading relationships, we've big people-to-people relationships. Other countries have significant defence relationships as well. So we have to do more by ourselves, but I think we're better off working within that democratic Western world as well, and that includes the USA. So I'm happy to continue that relationship. But on trade, Commissioner Šefčovič speaks for all of us in trade, and Ireland benefits from that, and he would consult with us, of course, especially on items that are very relevant to us. We'll continue in that kind of mindset. I think what the Commission will find with us as Presidency Council is a government that's very friendly to trade agreements.
Do you reckon there'd be any prospect or any interest in an EU-US summit over the course of the Irish presidency?
If that were to happen, we would welcome it, but I'm not sure that it's specifically planned at this particular moment. Yeah.
So just to follow up on that, Minister, I wanted to ask, do you think progress is possible on the ratification of CETA? I know you're working on it.
Yeah, we're working on it at the moment. It's gone through second stage and committee stage in the Dáil, so I'm hoping to have it in report stage next week. I haven't seen the Dáil schedule just yet, but that would chime well with the Taoiseach's visit to Canada. The arbitration amendment bill is simply a method of, is simply allowing us to ratify it. The ratification process is separate, and there's a constitutional requirement on the ratification of a treaty like CETA. So that's a totally separate process. The arbitration amendment bill allows us to put in place a system that we believe will pass constitutional muster to allow us to ratify CETA, and the benefits of CETA are very, very significant.
Very obvious. Is there anything else? I mean, there has been real progress made in the EU diversifying its trading relations. You've mentioned some of them already. Do you see any scope over the Irish presidency to open up discussions around new trade agreements? Or?
Well, I mean, look, we've worked with Australia, with India, Mercosur, though we voted against Mercosur, CETA. So and there are other ones, smaller ones on the agenda. Indonesia is a huge one, but there are other smaller ones as well. That are there, and look, in principle, we're very, very supportive. I mean, Mercosur, we just couldn't, I suppose, satisfy ourselves as to the protections for farmers, but we've always acknowledged that there are big benefits to the Mercosur Treaty, and Ireland will benefit from that.
To take a different tack, this week Ireland was visited by President Maya Sandu of Moldova. I know you had meetings with her. Indeed, I heard you speak very powerfully and very movingly about enlargement and what it has meant for Ireland, but also about Moldova, our shared European future with that country. Would you at this stage be able to say anything about what further progress can be made? Enlargement is a very long durée thing for countries like Moldova, but over the 6 months of the presidency, what can happen, do you think?
I'm actually confident that Moldova will progress during our presidency. They're doing actually a lot of the technical work at the moment. In fact, they're doing all the technical work they can do at the moment in terms of meeting the requirements of membership. But they're not officially, we haven't officially started negotiations with them because Hungary has a block on Ukraine. And because Moldova and Ukraine come in at the same time, we haven't moved Moldova along until we get clarity on Ukraine. Let's see what happens in the aftermath of the Hungarian election in relation to that, no matter who wins. So that would be an important moment, but I think we'd be very, very keen to put all of the accession countries on. But Moldova is a country where I have to say the politicians have really impressed me. Like, they're just really good people. They earn very little money. They want to do what's right by their country, and President Sandu is, I think, a real exemplar of that. But there are other politicians I met in Moldova, and they all have the same view, that they just want to improve their country, and they see Ireland as an example of how a country can be improved. And they have significant Russian interference in their country in terms of hybrid kind of warfare around their elections and the information space, so it's very, very tricky for them. And in fact, there are Russian troops in part of the country as well, in Transnistria. So it's a tricky position that they're in, and they do need a lot of help. They've had some really, really serious financial issues to deal with that have happened through no fault of their own, and I think we've been supporting them just to some extent through that as well.
I think that came across very clearly when President Sandu was here. In terms of the likes of Montenegro perhaps, or Albania, which are further along the enlargement journey than Moldova are, would you envisage is there scope for practical progression over the duration of the Irish presidency for them?
My view is that we can finish the Montenegro negotiations. We've actually just last month started what's called the ad hoc working group on the drafting of the accession treaty. That was always seen as a very significant step if that were to happen. And some countries were a bit nervous about that, maybe saying it was premature. We persuaded them that it wasn't. So that's happened. So everything's in place, actually. So except that Montenegro needs to do a lot more work now to close all the chapters of negotiation that are open, to do the work that's required. It's a merit-based process. They have a lot of new laws to put in place. This will be challenging for them, I've no doubt. They need help with that. They need help on the information side as well, because they're doing what Ireland might have done over a much longer period of time. Yeah. And I think if we can get the technical stuff, if we do our work and they do their work, then I think member states have no option but to admit them. So we want to make sure that all that work happens during our presidency. Certainly from an Irish point of view, we'll do everything we can to make sure that it does happen.
I think that's really, really clear, and there's a sincere messaging coming from government regarding Ireland's support.
Well, it's not all on us, you see, that's the other thing. Like, it is, unfortunately, Montenegro have work to do. Now, we actually have people in Podgorica helping them, actually, through the Institute of Public Administration, so that's really, really important as well. So.
But what I wanted to ask, and please sidestep if you'd rather not comment, but in terms of the mood in other capitals, because of course there is Moldova and the other countries aspiring for membership are working really hard, but in terms of other capitals, ultimately it's the member state to decide who can join. Can you summarise or kind of capture what you think the mood is?
Overall, the mood is very positive, but maybe some member states haven't quite sort of realised that it's happening as quickly as it is. So I think they need to do that. They need to make sure that they've that their public are ready for it, and to help Montenegro in particular along, because Montenegro is only a small country, 600,000 people. It won't make a huge impact in the EU, but actually it'll make a huge impact in terms of the reputation of the EU in the Western Balkans and in Moldova and in Ukraine as well, in terms of the process is actually real, because that's been the biggest complaint for a long time, that the process hasn't been real. We have a chance to show that the process is real. During our presidency as well, Iceland will hold a referendum on EU membership. That's interesting as well.
For sure. I just want to ask you about one or two other topics, Minister. That's one of the big events in the EU story over the past 10 years or so is its relationship with the UK. This June, just before the Irish presidency, will mark, hard to believe, but a decade since their referendum. And now obviously there has been a reset, to use the jaded term, between Britain and the EU, and there is good working relations there. But there's a bit of an expectation when we talk to peers, other think tanks and other thought leaders around Europe, that Ireland, with its particular advantage on the UK, that we might seek to ameliorate the EU-UK relations over the course of the presidency. Do you envisage anything specific regarding the UK?
Well, I think we have negotiations underway on SPS, on the emissions trading system, and on the youth mobility scheme. And I certainly would like to see really serious progress on them, maybe even before our presidency starts. So that would be really, really good, particularly from an Irish point of view, the ETS and the SPS agreements, because we have youth mobility. Everyone is mobile between Ireland and Britain under the common travel area and under the Brexit arrangements, but this is very important to the other member states as well. So there will be three big wins. Now, we are seeing reports that Britain is looking for other measures, or to join other aspects of the single market of the European Union. Ireland would certainly be very positively disposed to that. What I would say is that the member states as a whole are not going to accept a cherry-picking approach by the UK either. That there are lots of benefits to the European Union, but the only way those benefits actually work and can deliver is if you comply with some of the rules that we have there as well. So that's the question that they'll have to work out themselves. There's big benefits for Britain if this can go forward, there's no question, and I suppose their government will want to see an economic benefit. Yeah. There are also big benefits for Ireland too, from many points of view, fundamentally about peace, I would say too, because any kind of strengthening of the relationship between Ireland and the UK and the EU helps maintain, a stable situation in Northern Ireland. So we're very, very supportive of it. But when you join the single market, or you want aspects of it, there are requirements, and that would have to be discussed. But we have these three main approaches underway at the minute, and I think they could have very, very positive outcomes, I hope.
Last time we spoke, Minister, you kind of reminded me and reminded our listeners that you yourself and other government representatives are going to be representing the EU at some major international events. We're obviously hosting the EPC in Ireland in November, but aside from that, you'll be representing the bloc at COP, for example, I believe. And
Darragh O'Brien will do that as the Energy Minister or Climate Minister, and then Chris O'Sullivan, as I understand it, will represent us at the COP Biodiversity Summit, and there will be other ones as well. So it'll be the individual ministers that do that, but it's a huge amount of work, and a very proud moment for Ireland to be doing that, I think.
Is there anything that, just maybe to follow up on that from our discussion of before Christmas, is there anything in that space that has crossed your desk that you think is particularly interesting to Ireland's interests?
Well, there's so much crossing my desk at the moment that's particularly interesting, I have to say, in terms of what's going on. I mean, the MFF is the biggest project, actually, and it's still unclear as to whether we get that finished during our presidency. We certainly want to.
Yep.
And then you have some of the basic stuff, like my role as EU Minister. I'm not sure when I found this out, but you have to sit in the Parliament and respond to every single plenary debate, and I look forward to it. It's an honour, but it wasn't an aspect of the job that I knew about until recently, but it's very interesting, and I think it is good that the Parliament has that dialogue with the Member States and indeed with the Commission. We've put a lot of effort now, and I have to say all ministers have, into relationships to the European Parliament, because we know we can have all these ambitions, all these trilogues, all these proposals. We can't get anything through unless we have good relationships with our counterparts, not just at ministerial level, but in the Parliament and Commission as well. So we've invested a lot in that, and I think you'll see it paying off. But there's still a lot of work to do. It's all going, I think, very well to schedule. but there's a lot of work to do between now and the 1st of July, and then particularly from the 1st of July to probably not quite the 31st of December. Sometime we take the Christmas holidays, and that'll be our job more or less done. But of course, we're available at all points during the presidency to drive the agenda forward.
This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.